company. Oh, she started recording already. So this is the future of centric, human-centric companies. This is what the whole community builders, some of the focus has been around, transforming companies into communities. So it'd be lovely to hear in the chat while we wait for the last couple of people to come in, what excites you about that? What's piqued your interest? If that's not too big a word, it might be.
or what questions do you have around how, around the topic of human-centric companies or redesigning companies as communities? You see, I love questions.
Yes. Yeah, I think we just got someone new just joining. And say, intrigued and curious, love it. I think Antonia is still typing something. Or maybe she's surfing the web. I can't tell. I'm just teasing you because I am in love with the color coordination of your outfit, the wall behind you, the little post-it notes behind, and your glasses, which if you weren't in Latina Italy, I would be trying to steal physically off the body right now. They are that awesome.
So just to quickly give a framing of what we will be talking about for this last hour of the Community Builders Summit. Will be an intro. There's a word wall and an invitation coming from me on how we can reimagine how it would be like to redesign companies as communities. And again, another Filipino term that I would love to share, which is kapwa, and 3 mindset shifts that I would like to offer as we try to think of what is the future of human-centric companies. And then there's also a discount code. And for those who just want to stay backstage discussion after, I'll also be here.
After party.
So just a little bit of framing who I am. I'm Lana Yelenyev. I'm the co-founder of the Community Builders Summit. I consider myself a community alchemist. I love the word alchemy, the transformation, that there's something magical that happens. And that's what I believe that communities do. It magically brings change and transformation. I'm also a learning experience designer or strategist and an avid fire starter. So some of you would know, oh, she's from Community Rituals as well, or in collaboration with Days Conference. So I have different collaborations that I'm a part of. I consider myself a lifelong learner and a self-fullness advocate. How do we bring in our fullness of ourselves within the spaces that we're part of? And it was just such a rich session a while ago on cultivating safe and brave spaces. And this is why I love sharing that, because it feels in that self-fullness part. Together with Mika Nonen, we've written Community Builders, Designing Communities for Change. And that was more than a year ago. As you can see, it has been used by different community builders from different parts of the world. And we have also started the Community Builder Summit from last year, and we've redesigned this for this year to be a week-long, 5 days long celebration. And what is very interesting is that we've asked community builders, community leaders to bring in their expertise, bring in their different events, and to be part of co-creating this 5-day summit with us. And this would not be made possible if not for the people that have made it, as part of our team. Some of them are here. Mai and Antonia are here. Thank you. Also together with Sylvia Baroni and Jonathan Astor, they've helped put together the Community Builders Summit. Most of the recordings are going to be uploaded in the website, so it's communitybuilders.space. And you can also find the lightning talks that has been offered by different experts that are also there, and also the learning labs sessions that are more interactive would also be uploaded there, or there are already those that are uploaded there. So with that, I would just like to ask for you to share, what comes to your mind when you hear the word companies? What images, symbols, or analogy or picture come to mind? And just write it in the chat. Logo, corporate. Other images that comes to mind when you hear the word companies. Profit, gray suits, yes. Organizations, money, exclusive, corporate, competitive, shareholders, gray, people, power, economy, managers, ego, interactions. Now I would like to, what comes to your mind when you hear the word community? What images, symbols, analogy, picture come to mind? Hand in hand. Oh, that's a nice one. Connection, weaving, groups, inclusive, non-hierarchical, family, quality, caring. Circle, belonging, supportive. Not connected to profit, finances, warmth, support. Heart, dialogue. And let those words that you were writing down about community just fill you up. It's like, oh, how does that feel in the body? Or do you find yourself as you are reading the words smiling or nodding, or finding resonance in what was being shared? Force. Interesting. Compassion. Because then the invitation that I would like for you to think of is this. Now, how might we infuse these qualities of community in our companies? And I'll just stop here for a while and get back to seeing everyone. Any idea of all this, shared energy, compassion, empathy, family? How might we infuse this in companies? Go, Minda.
Hi, I'm Minda Bain. Nice to meet you all, and thank you for the session. I think you need somebody in the company with courage to speak up and to champion these ideas and make suggestions.
Courage to speak up and champion the ideas and make suggestions. I love that one. Thank you, Minda. Anyone else?
Invite people to bring their whole selves to work. And to touch in our last session, making it safe for them to do so. Difference.
Helen.
Yeah, I'm going to be the, since I think I might be the only person identified from the US here. So I'm going to be that US person who says, you need deep structural change, at least we do, because you can't do it just by creating that space, because the structure of the organizations and the way they're defined works against that.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna. I know that might be beyond the scope of this conversation, but my sense is if you only do those other things, then it's kind of like you're not a community. You're sort of a fake community.
Yeah.
That's just me coming from a deep place.
I love that you're bringing this in already, Ellen, the importance of deconstruction. You know, how can we deconstruct systems that are not working and be able to say, okay, what do we bring in and what do we take out? You know, how do we filter that? Anya, you had something to say? Or?
Yeah, I actually. Oh, sorry.
Tanya. Go ahead, Tanya.
Oh, okay, thank you. No, I was going to actually say what Ellen said, that we need a different kind of leadership so that actually people can create that space, can support that champion in the organization. Just this.
Thank you. Anya?
Well, I was about to just put it in the chat actually, but this idea of the structural aspect, the quote, I'll hit return. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. So this idea of the culture that which comes from the structure, actually from this taking apart, and then otherwise, no matter how impassioned our strategies may be, if there isn't an environment which can sustain them, it
will break apart.
Yeah.
So this invitation is something that I would want to expand more in this session with you. I mean, I would like to share the different mindsets, that we can bring in forward after this session. I do believe in what Albert Einstein said, we cannot solve problems with the same thinking that we used when we created them, similar to what was already being shared by Ellen of why we need to deconstruct the systems. And one of the prevailing concepts in Filipino psychology that I would want to impart is this idea of interconnectedness. If there is anything around the message for this session of how can we promote future human-centric companies, is the idea of kapwa. How can we be in deep connection to everything, not just to people, not just to our purpose, not just to the profit, but also to the planet, and nowadays also to machines, to AI. So this deep interconnectedness with all beings is what we use in this term kapwa, which is a part of Filipino psychology. And if you look at it deeper, this is this unity of the one of us and the other. So there's nothing that is not a part of us. We were always connected in one way, shape, or form, which if you think about it, and I know some of you here in this call, and I don't know others that are in this call, if we look at how did you get to be in this space? How did you get to be informed of these events? This interconnectedness, and even just looking at the differences from where we are in right now. We have from New York, from UK, from Singapore, we have from Italy, we have from Copenhagen, we have from Switzerland. We're coming in from different parts of the globe. And Pakikipagkapwa recognizes how we are interconnected in a lot of ways. And with that, what does this mean for companies as we acknowledge this interconnectedness? These are the three mindsets that I would like for us to fully ground ourselves in, on how we can say that we are human-centric as organizations or as companies. The first one is start with who. The second one is moving from the transactional to a more transformational. And this idea of leadership that we've been mentioning already. How can we move from leadership to communityship? So start with who was presented by Michelle Bachmann. He in one of his articles in Medium, he wrote about the golden spiral. That's why I don't advocate for Simon Sinek's Start With Why. I agree more with the Start With Who. You know, who are we? Who are we designing things for? Who are we serving? And when we come from a place of who, there's a lot more that we can really dig deep in. You know, like, who are these people that we would want to serve? Why is this important for us? How can we serve them? What are the things that they currently have already, that their strengths that we can amplify? So this, for me, is a crucial pillar. And this is also why in the Community Builders book, we've emphasized on understanding the different who, the different stakeholders. There are people who might be the beneficiaries of change. There might be the ones who are driving the change. There might be the ones who are ambassadors for the change. You know, those who are not as active but can be tapped in to support. And there might be, there are people who are funders. So these are just four major, and there are also other who within different organizations or companies. But to really define, you know, why is it important for them to have a community, or to be a community, and what change are they looking for? Another part of understanding the who is understanding the journey that they're part of. This is the Saturn Change model. It's one of the worksheets in the Community Builders book, wherein we introduced the Saturn Change model. Saturn Change model was created by Virginia Satir. You might know her from her work on the tip of the iceberg. The tip is what we see, and there's more underneath it. She is a psychotherapist and has been using this framework in her work, and now even organizations are also adapting it for understanding change. And it's a very, very simple model. So it goes with what is the late status quo, you know, what was in their comfort zone before, and what was the foreign element that comes into play within the person, within the organization, within the company. And that foreign element might create some resistance at first, but eventually entrust the person in a space of chaos. And chaos is a very fertile ground for experimentation. It's a very fertile ground for creativity, because you then think of, oh, what are the ways in which I can get out of this funk? You know, what are the ways in which I can get out of this chaos? So you try different methods, you try different practices, up until the point that you get into this transforming idea, this aha moment. You know, maybe if I do this, I can get out of chaos. And from that transforming idea, you practice, integrate, probably also deconstruct certain patterns, try to evaluate things differently, try to look things differently, up to over time, you get to a new status quo. And this new status quo is again a place where activism is very abundant, because now you're like, oh, I've experienced this, I know this information, or I know this process already. I'd like to share this with others, and I'd like others to be helped and to be in service of what it is that I've gone through. So this new status quo is a very fertile ground for sharing, for letting others know what we did that got us out of chaos. And then I see this Saturn change model as like an expanding spiral. So as we go through our new status quo, eventually it becomes a late status quo, and then another foreign element comes in our lives, and then we go into this into these different phases. And I can imagine that you can easily see yourself in this model, the different points in your life, the peaks, the pits, the bridges, the transitions. These different stages, these different phases is something that we, all of us, go through in different form. And And this is very crucial when we're looking at Start With Who, to understand who are these people that we're serving and where are they in this state or in this phase that they are in. And to give it in the context of an organization, I'm collaborating with Stephen Dargan and Sarah Metcalf in a program for happiness at work, wherein we've created a program on bringing the happier team home. We have a short clip on that in the website, in the Community Builders Space website, wherein we were talking about what is this about the bringing the happier team home. And in this program, one of the activities that we did was to encourage people to bring in an element of themselves back to the office. So an artifact that they can bring into the office as they, after 18 months of not seeing each other, went to go back again to the office. And in the sharing of the different artifacts, there were some who shared how, when the start of the pandemic, this was the shoe of my baby. Now my baby is a bit grown up. And there were a lot of sharing around how they were during the pandemic. What was their chaos like? And a lot of resonance and a lot of understanding as well, to the point that in the sharing, there were people in the group who were saying, I didn't know that you had it so difficult, that you were juggling too much. So this understanding of where people are at is very crucial, so that we can also know how can we best serve, how can we best help, how can we best support. And in different phases, like what I said, different phases have also different ways of doing things. Like chaos is really creativity and experimentation, whereas when we're looking at practice and integration, we'd want to have more accountability. We'd want to have more more partnerships, collaboration, so that we sustain whatever it is that we want to change. And when we're starting from who and looking at where people are at, we get to have a fuller picture of what we can do, so that we can really connect and really define the different activities that we'd want to do for these people that we're serving. And I'll stop first with that. And curious to know, from hearing this first mindset, from Start With Why to Start With Who, what are your impressions, or what are your questions?
Well, I've always, when I've been doing some training and things, I've used the Simon's, the golden circle a lot. So this is really making me think now about starting with the who, particularly when we're thinking about companies as communities. So yeah, I'm going to look up more of this.
Yeah, I'll send the link as well for Michelle's article on the on starting with who, on the golden spiral. Anyone else? A question or an impression about this first mindset on starting with who? I've given this to multiple groups, communities already, this training on Start With Who. To be honest, I've given this to even 3 hours straight of just really going into the Satyr change model. And every time people are like, they revisit it, because it's just so different from how we're framed to say, we need to start with purpose. We need to start with, this is what we need to do. But what if we start with the people? How can that shift the things that we're doing? And one comment from Carlos Saba, he's the founder of Happy Startup. He says, it's actually the model that keeps on giving, because once you work with the who, you get to understand and uncover a lot of things. So this mindset shift, from the why to the who, is an ongoing process. It's a deepening of our understanding of who we're serving and who we are as well. And this is why human-centric companies does not only mean, others, but also ourselves. How do we understand ourselves? is a part of the who equation. Now let's get into the next mindset, which is on looking at from transformation to, but before that, here are the questions. Probably would want to, how about you explore the community voice? What is the community narrative? What are the shared aspirations? What are the collective concerns? These are just questions to play with. What are their hopes? What are their fears? What solutions do they have in mind? Especially that part. What solutions do they have in mind? When you're starting with who, you also begin to start appreciate an asset-based model rather than a deficit model, rather than a needs-based model. Because when we start with who, we also recognize that these people bring in a lot of assets already within the organization. They bring in strengths within the company. So it's not about, oh, they need this, they need that. It's they have this, they're inherently strong in different capabilities. And what can we do to amplify those capabilities? So when we're starting with who, we can also already start with, what's the collective wisdom that people have? So another question is, what do you think from your experience are the essentials to creating transformational companies? And then put it in the chat. What are essentials to creating transformational companies? Courage. Ooh, lots of courage here. Willingness to risk. Will. So let's do this. I'm gonna share a statement and then you just rate from 1 to 5. You don't have to put it in the chat. You can put it in a piece of paper if you want. So when it comes to vision for the company, we focus on having an integrated vision rather than focus on mutual gains. How applicable is this within the organization that you're part of or the organization that you're leading? And it's the rating from 1 to 5. 1 meaning not so much. 5 is really we have this bagged. So when it comes to vision for the company, we focus on having an integrated vision rather than focusing on mutual gains. Our leadership style is distributed rather than one-directional. Why is laughing? I'm curious to know what your ratings are.
No, I'm laughing because I wrote it on the chat.
It's okay. It's also okay if you want to. We believe in fostering commitment rather than compliance within our teams and other stakeholders. One to 5. Our communication channels are open rather than closed. Transparency is very much in there. We value interdependence in our relationships rather than mere support. This idea of teaching people how to fish rather than giving them fish. Our goals and intentions are focused in the long run and not just the short term. So long-term mission is also part of the organization or the company. We believe and work for systemic change rather than selective wins. I'm gonna stop first and ask you, how was those questions for you, and the pulse check that you did within the organization that you're part of? Anything that springs out? Mai, what do you want to? Yeah.
I was actually very happy because we may not be there, but our eyes are directed at the same direction with regards to the questions you asked, Lana. It's not easy to get to that state, but we're clear on where we want to go, and so we are willing to struggle through it. And it's shitty sometimes, you know.
Again, this being in this discomfort.
Yeah.
For those of you, Mai is part of Our Better World, wherein they share stories, good stories of good. So do check out their work. Anyone else who, you know, from the things that you've listed, anything that pops up for you? Yeah, Minda.
Leadership question was interesting. The one directional, or what was it, inclusive? I can't remember what it was. So I worked for a really big company at the beginning of the year, was with them for 3 years, and the country manager was brilliant during the pandemic. You know, he did town hall meetings and we all logged in, and he was, you can tell he trained on well-being. He used to start with things, and really resonated with me. However, that did not filter down to middle management and to the teams. And in my team, I did say to my manager, oh, we should take a leaf out of his book, maybe try this or maybe try that. It didn't land. And so that one directional, even though it comes from the top, doesn't necessarily get filtered down. So I'm just interested in how you would approach something like that in a company. It's a big company. It's one of the vaccine companies, actually. So I won't limit.
Thank you for sharing that, Minda. And one of the things that we would talk about is this, you know, how to strengthen the middle line within companies. And that's the last bit of the mindset shift. So when we're talking about, where did it go? There you go. So when we're talking about communities, in transformational communities within organizations, this is, again, another play from the Community Builder book. This is the From Audience to Community. There's just some, I see this as a slider. You move from one to another depending on different situation. But this is more of like the breadth and width that you can go from mutual gain to integrated vision to one way to distributed in terms of leadership, compliance to commitment when it comes to engagement. So these are just some of the elements that you might want to think of when it comes to your organization. Other elements that are not yet here would be like power. You know, how is power distributed? How is this decision making distributed? You know, how is the health of the organization? So well-being, like what the Minda already mentioned, is also crucial. So these are just some of the factors that you might want to think of. So we'd want to go from mutual gain to integrated vision, from one way to distributed leadership, and not just distributed in, you know, one level, but really to the systems itself. From compliance to commitment, from close to open communications, you know, transparency is very crucial as well. From supportive to interdependent relationships, and from long-term to short-term timing. So not just having this idea of, oh, what are we going to do 5 years from now? What are we going to do 10 years from now? But also inviting this indigenous wisdom of looking at 7 generations ahead of us. is something that we can also try in. This is an indigenous practice of looking at what are the decisions that we make as an organization that can affect 7 generations forward. And then from selective means to systemic change as outcomes. It doesn't go with just the level of, oh, we're just changing this, but we're changing the whole ecosystem. So these are some of the questions that you might want to look at, encouraging an integrated vision. So the vision of your organization, whose vision is that? Is it just the vision of the founders, or is it the vision of all the stakeholders? Which is also why I love the practice of nemawashi, the Japanese practice of nemawashi, meaning you take from the roots. And this practice is before you even do a proposal or send in a proposal, you take in the voices of the people already, so that when you send in a proposal, they have an understanding of it already, and you can get to a consensus with it. So these type of practices can help us to move our organization from being transactional to transformational, making channels open and transparent. What are those channels anyway that needs to be open? What are the channels that needs to be closed? And understanding what, how to use those different channels. And how are you planning and setting yourself in the long game of this idea of long-termism? And then the last mindset is from leadership to communityship. There's a Harvard article from Henry Mintzberg that wrote about importance of communityship, wherein he wrote, communityship requires a more modest form of leadership that might be called engaged and distributed management. A community leader is personally engaged in order to engage others, so that anyone and everyone can exercise initiative. This for me is very important when we're looking at how can we create human-centric companies or organizations. Is the idea that leaders themselves are not just taking in all the power, but empowering others so that they can take the initiative within the organization. I'm curious, for those of you who have examples already of companies that showcases communityship. In our team meetings, I've shared this already. Gravity Payment, Dan Price. If you don't know his story, and that has been 5 years ago already. What he did was he put up a cap in the salaries, so that all his employees would have the minimum is $70,000 per year, and that's in where he is based on. That is big. So the salary range was so that everybody can get to that state. So even those that are that are working in the administrative offices, that was his goal. And he even took in a price cut for his salary so that he can get to that goal, and even ask some of his managers to do that. If I'm not mistaken, just 1 or 2 left the organization thinking, no, it's not going to work. But his company is still going on even during the pandemic. So that for me is an example of what communityship can be in the light of how management can distribute resources and have the idea of how can we empower others. Because from what he has shared, because of what they did, some of his employees were able to find a place to live in, because before they couldn't even afford a mortgage. They have quality of life, they're some are studying, some are doing other things, their hobbies. So this is an example of a communityship. And I know Jonathan, you have an example there in Copenhagen of one.
Yeah, a telecoms company called hello everybody, by the way, called Greenspeak. where everyone from inception started off with the same salary. Newcomers that come in all get paid a basic salary and nothing more, even the CEO. And that's always the case. Their profits go to charity, which the community votes on where the money actually goes. And they don't really do marketing or sales because it's not part of their purpose, but the company every week dedicates a day to doing good things out in the community, and they film that. And after COVID, when they tried to get sales going again, they tried to do cold calling. Didn't work because it went against their community purpose, and they went back to what they were doing best, which was, going out into the community. This week they've been cleaning the rivers of plastic in that day, filming it, and from that, they're linking those activities to sales and all the really grubby business KPIs like churn, which is improving as well by believing in community. I believe the belief is important. That's how they go about doing things. I think that's what community means to them. A shared vision on this is how we roll. And if you want to join and you roll like this, come along.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. Anyone else who has an example of a company with communityship? There's also from New Zealand, Inspiral. So Inspiral is a collective of different consultants, practitioners. And by being part of this collective, they do co-budgeting together. So they have a co-budgeting tool, and they are represented in different fields as well. So they look for projects and do work together. Another example that you might want to check out, Zebras Unite, is also another collective that's coming up. And Zebras Unite is a collective of companies, organizations that identify themselves with the element of the zebra. And why not a unicorn? Why a zebra instead of a unicorn? And in the article that they've written, because unicorns, what unicorns do is they break, they disrupt economies, they disrupt the systems, and oftentimes that disruption is not advisable. It's not it does not present a positive return. So we can put in like similar situations with Uber, for example. Uber has disrupted the taxi industry, but in essence, what it did provide was a mechanism for people to be able. So it's the app that really was that big factor around it. So for Zebras Unite, they're looking for organizations who are collective, which are zebras. They do things as a collective. They don't do things on their own. Who looks at how to exit companies to communities. So they have this program on exit to community, meaning instead of say for example a founder thinks, okay, I don't want to do this business anymore, instead of selling it to venture capitals or investors, they sell it to the community. They sell it to their employees, they sell it to their stakeholders. So this idea of exit to community is also something very, very new, yet very crucial, because if we look at it, like say for example, if you have a tech company and is absorbed by a bigger corporation, what they don't do is they don't absorb the people. They absorb the technological advancement that company has, but they don't absorb the people. And that is also something that we need to think of when we are exiting as a company. How do we exit the community? So these are just some examples of how communityship can come to play. And these are the questions that you might want to think about. How might we go from top down to middle out? Meaning the middle persons are the ones that we're also activating so that they can activate others as well. That they can engage, encourage, and energize the middle managers so that they can step in. And how might we determine the just enough leadership that needs to happen in the organization? The point where, as a leader, as the source, and there's this book by Tom Nixon, the source, when we're working with the source, that as that source or founder, how can we know when is the time to say, okay, I need to delegate other things, I need to put other people in charge, the just enough leadership. How might we create decisions from different ways, from consent to consensus to consultative levels? It cannot always be consensus, it cannot always be consent, and it cannot always be consultative. But how can we define which are the decisions that needs to be in these different ways, so that it's also transparent for others? And how might we cultivate deeper trust in the company culture that will allow for distribution of leadership to naturally occur? And this is also why this topic a while ago of cultivating safe and brave spaces is very important, because trust is built when there's a sense of belonging, when there's a sense of care, when there's a sense of safety. So how are we cultivating all this within the company culture so that leadership can be transferred, and also people can be engaged and emboldened to try new things? And lastly, before we get into this question and answer phase, I'd like to share from Peter Block. He's the author of Community, the Structure of Belonging. He wrote, the most sustainable improvements in community occur when citizens discover their own power to act. And let's shift community to company. When most sustainable improvements in company occur when citizens discover and change citizens to teams, discover their own power to act. When teams stop waiting, for professionals or elected leadership to do something, and decide they can reclaim what they have delegated to others. And this is the essence of communityship, of being able to say, okay, how can we invite others to share the leadership with us? So it's not just one person holding the rein, but multiple others holding it, holding the organization, so that we can be fully step in the organizations. And before we get into that follow and everything, I'm curious, how was this? There's 3 different mindsets, from why to who, from transactional to transformational, and from leadership to communityship. Impressions, questions? Feel free to unmute yourself. Yeah, Antonia.
Yes, Lala, thank you. It's always interesting to, hear your thoughts about the community. And, I did the training with you with community building, and it was really mind blowing. It was like mind shifting on how we see and how to build the communities. And I think all the questions that you raise are really helpful, as a professional, to be, mindful, what it is actually our community and where we want to go, with our colleagues, our company, our, in different settings. So even though maybe, we can't change things the way we want, but we know what kind of questions we can ask to ourselves and, have them in mind. Because sometimes we feel powerless, but we know that maybe we are on the right track. That we know that there is a direction we can follow, and it's a positive direction. So thank you very much, because I always admire your work around community. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonia, and thank you for acknowledging that there's more questions than answers. That was not the intention for me to give you answers. My intention was to give you questions that you can, like what you said, bring in, not just for yourself, but also bring into your team or to the people that you work with. For me, there's so much potential when we're asking the right questions together. And by doing that as a collective, then we get to also see things from different perspectives and also to get to solutions that we already know that's there within the team. So it's very crucial to have generative questions that allows us to reflect, take a pulse check, see how we're doing as an organization, as a team, and then also see how we can use these questions to take the next steps. Leslie.
I was just thinking perhaps you'd like to work closely with the politicians in the UK at the moment.
Oh gosh, I think that's one field that I've told myself I might I've been asked actually in different situations already, from when I was in the Philippines to here in the Netherlands, and I was like, no, politics is not something that really sparks interest in me. And Mike can attest why, because of the politics in the Philippines. But yes, governance is also one system that we need to look at, how we need to create a better system for it. Jonathan.
Yeah, I was going to add, thank you for the intriguing questions. I've done your course, which I've loved. Anyone who hasn't done it, please do it. It's a real deep dive. So many good questions. It seems to me that we have the questions on the organizational level and manager level. I really liked that approach, depending on your entry point into this. But I also get this feeling inside me of kind of, there's a waiting amongst the ranks to start community, right? I've got to wait for the top down to tell me about community. Well, could it, like your last slide suggested, can it come from bottom up, where we can ask ourselves at an individual level, if community is about connection, how authentically am I connected to myself? How authentically am I connected to my teammates? How could I be better authentically connected? What is the truth here? And can the revolution, if we call it that, come from us asking ourselves questions relating to our own authenticity, and practicing that with our teams and creating clusters rather than waiting to have a connected experience every day. So thanks for the question approach. You've obviously got me thinking.
and Jonathan, this is also the reason why communities of practice are very important in organizations, because when you establish communities of practice, this is really coming in from the bottom up, because it's grounded to what is alive. Using the nonviolent communication, what's alive in the team, what's alive in the people, and how can we as a team attend to that, attend to what is alive in us. A very good example would be in Ellen. This is within the context of the US, right? When racial injustice really spiked in the US, so different organizations started creating communities of practice on how can we attend to this, to this discomfort and to this pain that we have around racial injustice. And these were started within, from the bottom up. It is very much possible. What I would encourage, of course, is to amplify. How to amplify that is when you also do from different angles, that you have people who are so aware of what they bring in to the organization. So that self-fullness that I was mentioning about, that it is something that we're working on within the culture of the organization. And at the same time, as leaders within the organization, how can we trickle in the different ways that people can engage in these activities? And this is why at the what's this, when COVID happened, we realized the importance of the water cooler effect. A place of gathering, it's a place of gathering, it's a place of people to talk. How are you? What's happening to you? What's going on? These are spaces that we need to cultivate so that people can bring themselves fully in an organization. And by them bringing their full selves in, they're also motivated to engage in what can we do as an organization. But this needs to be, not just coming from the team, but it needs also to be structurally added, that we create these spaces where people can step up. So it might be another question is, how are we creating those spaces within the organization where people can fully step up? Yes, Leslie. And then I think
my worry at the moment is that, a lot of this lone working at home, and some offices and companies have said that that's what's going to happen from now on. And people aren't even going to the same place, let alone, any community. And I think that's going to have an enormous effect in the future, because I know some people that live on their own, they work on their own. And it's quite devastating, really, because as you say, you don't get that creativity with others and at the water cooler.
Yeah. Indeed. And this is also why what is relevant, to be honest, is not to jump in to say, oh, this is what we need to do, but rather go back to the office intentionally. And then from there to say, okay, how can we do this better? What works for people? Because for some people, it might be working, working from home. Introverts, are probably having the time of their lives being at home. Yet extroverts are suffering because they need that. They need the interaction. They need the engagement. So we cannot approach things from just one perspective. We need to take in the different voices. So how are we offering that as a space for different voices to be heard? Ellen.
Yeah, and of course this is kind of like a challenge question at the very so I apologize for that one. I was thinking about what Leslie said, first of all, and yes, it is interesting. Like, I quite enjoy being at home, but I also like being connected and in community. And so that I think and it's then, this company has to maintain a space. Like, is it worth it if the idea is, well, come in sometimes, or when you want, like when you want that feeling. But I also think it's been hard to go back to the idea of prescribed office. And, and we still obviously have challenges with, pandemic. It's not just, so that's an interesting thing. But the thought that I was coming to when you said, cultivating this and how important it is, and you brought up the racial justice situation, and without going into the complexities and the nuances and so on, one thing that occurs to me as I always listen to this is how to see how do you get to a place where you're cultivating but not colonizing? Because taking community and saying we want to cultivate your sense of community, and then kind of corporatizing and brandifying and doing all the things that we do that sort of then suck the creativity and the real connection out of it. So it's always a question for me. So maybe another session.
I'll drop it in with one thing is really to go with the who. If we stay with the start with who, then it's a process of who needs to be heard in these spaces. Whose voices are we not hearing? Because then we get into this if that is where we're questioning things, Then we get more into this creative space of, okay, how can we invite them? Rather than a prescriptive, oh, this is how it needs to be. And it's the same when we're looking at redesigning companies to communities, to have people first define what is community for them. Because it might be that there's different ways of people defining community. So how can we even get to a shared definition of what community is as an organization? Might be a crucial step, so that we can create that parameters for ourselves, that guardrails that says, oh, okay, if we are to be in community with each other, this is how we would want to integrate with each other. This is how we would want to engage with each other. This is how we would want to meet each other. So it also provides us not just with that, with that boundaries or guardrails, but it also provides us with, the creativity of looking at in what ways or strategies can we meet this goal of being in community with each other. So, yes, Jonathan.
Yeah, it's the last point. That's a great inspiration from Ellen and Leslie. Yeah, have I got time for a small challenging point here?
Yes.
Probably not.
If it's okay for people to, we're already past.
I see COVID, based on what you've said, as a time when we're now away from the office, if you have a job. And I think that's a good thing, because now we've got a chance to really assess our own connection. What connection do we have in our lives?
Yeah.
Now, if your office was the best connection that you had in your life, that's great. But if it's not, I think it puts an onus on ourselves as individuals to take our connection seriously.
Yeah.
How we self-connect and take ownership of that. It's like asking we need connection like we need food. And COVID is telling us that. I don't expect my employer to feed me. So why should I expect my employer to provide me with one of the base elements of survival? I've discovered in COVID times how important connection is. I should have known it before, but I really feel it viscerally. So I'm taking ownership of that now. So I think the question is it the company's job to build communities and connection, or is it our jobs to do that? With a bit of cynicism as to whether companies will be able to achieve that authentically.
Well, there are companies who are, right? So
I think it's a very small list. I think it's a very small list.
Yeah, we have models that are, that are growing, and this is why we need to expand this more. This awareness, this conversations more, bringing it in not just within this circle, but also outside of this circle. When you were mentioning, about connection, what I'm reminded of is the practice in NVC. Now, in nonviolent communication, we say conflict arises in the level of strategies, not in the level of needs. Because needs, we feel needs, we know needs. Where conflict arises is how we try to meet those needs, the strategies in which we do to meet those needs. And oftentimes leaders would say, oh, this is my strategy, and then that's it. So how can we allow for different strategies to come in? Might be a way for us to bridge that as well, there's not just one way of looking at the situation. There's multiple ways of looking at the situation. Well, how can we create that space where these multiple perspectives are brought in? And that allows us to, creatively play with different strategies. And with that, thank you very much for joining me for today. Please feel free to connect with me in LinkedIn, and share your insights, things that your questions. You can check it out, the recordings at Community Builders Space. And lastly, for those who are interested in if you're interested in checking out the Community Builders book, you can find it at the Community Builders Space shop. And if you put in "We Are Community," you'll get a 50% discount. And that's the digital version, so that you can also use these tools for your organizations. And I'll stop that. Thank you everyone. And for those who can, with a word to check out, what's one word that you would like to check out from today's session? Antonia.
Mindful. Thank you, Lana.
Thank you, Antonia. Anyone else?
Blessed.
Yes. Thank you, Mai.
Rebirth.
Rebirth. Oh, thank you, Sylvia.
Inspiring.
Thank you, Tambu.
Mine.
Thank you, Leslie.
I'd say important and purposeful.
Important and purposeful. Gratitude from Claire. Thank you.
I'd say action.
Thank you, Linda. Ellen, would you like to share yours?
My brain isn't firing the word, but it's definitely about. I actually found this challenging is the wrong word, but it's close to challenging. Like it was something deeper than just, more than inspiration.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and have a blessed weekend. Bye.
You too. Bye. Bye-bye. Thank you.